Morning. Sorry I'm late. Shiny, I'm in the right portal, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, brilliant. Good morning.
Morning, everyone.
Good morning. Can we stop the video there, please? Good morning to everyone. A very warm welcome. And it's on a really hot day that we invite you to share with us this really informative chat on AARTO updates. At last count for registration, there was a total of 645 that had been attending, that wanted to attend. So thank you for being here. And we trust that those who are joining us will see the benefits of what we're going to share this day. This legislation, when it's in full play, will have a direct impact on both us as individuals and companies. Admittedly, there are some unknowns which will come out in the wash. There are cracks in the system, none of which we want to paper over. There are real challenges ahead when the state president issues his proclamation. But today, we'd like to better understand the impact of what the current situation is and when we start seeing it in effect, and then learn from industry experts, which you've seen the panelists online, what is happening in their industries. But before we do that, to go into AARTO's presentation, I'd like to just walk you through a few slides on what some of the systems are with regard to demerit points in other parts of the world. And I'd like to kick off by sharing this quote for you. There's two quotes, in fact. One is from Martin Luther King. "Nothing in all the world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity." And we trust and know that in some instances, individuals have taken a stand against AARTO without even knowing what it stands for. And then, of course, the really fine one that stands out is from Confucius, which he says, "Real knowledge is to know the extent of one's ignorance." Your participation and attendance today, we trust, will help us understand just what is involved. So this power chat is going to shed light on AARTO. We did invite the Minister of Electricity, but apparently he prefers to be kept in the dark. So let's move ahead as to the real points that most people are concerned about, and that is demerit points. In this discussion, I thought let's just have a look at where the system works in other parts of the world. There's a total of 11 countries highlighted in blue, and their flags are there, that in the application of demerit points, they have seen a change in driver behavior, and they've seen a 20% reduction in road crash fatalities. So that really speaks to something that's important. But in my research, I picked up this European Transport Research Review done in 2023. And notice what it's determined there. It's taken from the abstract, the full report is over there. And I'd like to read that out. The findings showed that during the 3-year period after the measure's implementation, the decrease in committing violations was 70%, and simultaneously there was a decrease in driver's accident involvement on average of 1% in severe accidents and of 11% in total injury accidents. So in other parts of the world, the system works. But in the meantime, what I would like to talk to about AARTO is the heart of the matter. There's 3 primary intentions from our perspective. It is to improve road safety, change driver behavior, and save lives. And in the process of AARTO working, we'll notice that those are the 3 things that many persons are concerned about: demerit points, fines, and penalties. Road safety is critical to all of us, individuals and organizations, because the United Nations Decade of Action, implemented in 2021, seeks to find by the year 2030 a 50% reduction. And if we carry on at the rate that we are now, we will never achieve that. There are systems in place, best practices, and the one of which is really promoted extensively abroad is the SAFE system. It speaks to matters that are really dear to our heart. And if AARTO, in its application, sees these things done correctly, we trust that we will see a change. However, we know that industries, there are associations that we have represented here, will talk to what happens in their industries. And collectively, when we show you some of the stats that they're involved in, we trust that you'll see the merit of listening to them. So with that, we've got roughly 7 seconds before AARTO is unpacked by AARTO Swanepoel. AARTO Swanepoel, thank you very much for joining us. Please do join us and share your viewpoints.
Good morning. Thank you. Let me just share my screen here. Can you see my screen?
Not yet. Charmaine, can you kill your video there, please, in the background? And if you can share your screen, AARTO.
Okay, I just want, can you see it now?
Not as yet.
Okay, just let me try again.
You see it?
Always works like this. When we test it, it works. And when we get out to actually get it done, it doesn't. So let's see. Is it sharing now?
You see it?
Wonderful.
We can see you, but not the screen. There we are. It's starting, AARTO.
Okay. Thank you very much for the opportunity. And hopefully you'll be able to see my screen now. And let's open it up a bit because then everyone can read. Okay, is that working properly?
Yes,
Correct, we can
go
see.
ahead.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. As you can see, I updated my information as last week AARTO was information was updated again. So let's start. Please take note that this is a flash presentation of 45 minutes. Normally when I do proper AARTO training or information session, it takes about 2 to 3 hours because there's lots of more detail requirements and many of it actually spills over into the national road traffic legislation. So looking at AARTO in isolation sometimes is difficult. I'll try and just go through the main points. And obviously, if there's anyone who has a question on something, hopefully I've covered what you are requesting. If we just look very quickly at the AARTO history, I think by now everyone knows what's going on. The AARTO Act was approved by Parliament way back in 1998. So just to let you know how old I am, I was actually involved in assisting with some of the meetings and stuff. I didn't actually draft the act. I assisted with the regulations way back from 1996 when I was a consultant at the Department of Transport. There were quite a few changes to the legislation because the AARTO was new. There was a lot of things that didn't gel well in the beginning, and they amended it. Then it was implemented in 2008 in Joburg and Tshwane as a pilot project initially. In 2010, the intention was to roll out AARTO countrywide. What happened then was that the legislation was stipulated for implementation on 1 July, which was in the middle of the 2010 World Cup in South Africa, the Soccer World Cup. So on the day it was supposed to come into force, the president actually retracted the proclamations because having 500,000 tourists here with a new traffic fine system was not actually good. At that stage, the minister then, I think it was De Boer Peters, said, but there's a few things in the legislation they're not keen on, like one of the issues in the legislation that we currently still have, because the amendment has not been implemented, states that they can actually take your stuff and go and sell it if you don't pay your traffic fine. They can impound your property. And they felt that that was a little harsh. So to stop that, they decided they were going to take that and a few other things to Parliament and try and amend that before they actually go for a new implementation date. That was in 2013. Unfortunately, the legislation between going to Cabinet and going to Parliament spent time there until 2019. Only then was the amendment approved. So due to no fault of AARTO as such, it was simply circumstances and the very, very slow processes in Parliament, which we've seen with the National Road Traffic Act, as well as the NLTA as well, have taken a very long time to go through the process. After AARTO was finalized, they were going to implement it in 2020, and then we had COVID. You don't implement new legislation during COVID. And then just when they were ready for it in 2021, the AARTO guys decided that they also want to have a part of the pie, and they challenged the constitutionality of AARTO. It was initially successful in the Constitutional Court, and it was then part of the constitutional process for nearly a year and a half. There was a judgment by the Constitutional Court in July 2021. It's important to understand, many people, I get quite a few emails from people saying that AARTO is illegal because of that court case. In fact, AARTO was never challenged in the court case. It was the power of the national government to make AARTO that was challenged. Not one sentence in the AARTO legislation on the process, demerit points, anything like that, was ever challenged. The only thing that they were dealing with was, should this be national or provincial legislation? Now, personally, I can't see why someone would want 9 AARTOs. Managing one is difficult enough, and things like demerit points can only work nationally. Fortunately, the Constitutional Court also agreed on that, and Judge Zondo said that AARTO is legal, it can roll out, it is national legislation. The provinces can make stuff on top of that national minimum standards, but that is where the legislation starts. Furthermore, there was a challenge on registered mail. The guys from OTA felt that registered mail should still be the way to serve stuff instead of electronic mail. Now, the judge fortunately said this is the 21st century, registered mail is really outdated, and that it is possible to electronically serve something. So fortunately, those arguments were thrown out, and since then, the legislation could actually go ahead. So what happened then? There was a rollout plan that was supposed to start in February this year. And the idea was in July, the other municipalities, there was going to be 2 sets of municipalities. First, your major big municipalities, and then your smaller rural ones. And then once that is finished, then it would, in September, there would be a rollout of the demerit points. Unfortunately, many of these things were sent through the political process up to the president's desk just in the beginning of December. And as many of you who may be working in government know, getting anything through that process during December and January is quite a challenge. And unfortunately, this legislation was still in the process of going there by the time the first date arrived. So last week, the RTIA announced that they are not obviously rolling out in February, as anybody has seen, that they will be doing it later in the year, but they have not provided a new date, simply because it is very difficult for them to predict at what stage this is going to go through. I think you must also realize that we are sitting with an election year, and all kinds of funny things happen during an election year, and having a president signing off new demerit point legislation and stuff like that. And the guys from the RTIA and department is not always in charge of that process. They send legislation through, but it may be that it could be on the president's desk for quite some time. The other thing they also still need to do is to appoint the members of the tribunal that it will be responsible for doing the AARTO tribunal appeals. And as that is also still in the process, instead of giving a new date which they have no control over, they said that the moment they see things are moving, it's going to the president, they're signing it, they will let the people know. So I spoke to the guys from the RTIA last week, and they said that is a better plan than giving a new date and then somebody comes along and say, but you know, you haven't met this date again. The idea is once this rollout has taken place, the very last part of that will be the demerit points. To understand AARTO, one quickly needs to explain the criminal procedure system to people as well, because people seem to, especially those people who are against AARTO, to say that the demerit point system and AARTO is actually this very bad system, and the criminal procedure system is the holy grail, which is in fact completely not the case. I was a prosecutor for many years, and the criminal procedure system was designed for your Oscar Pistorius type trial, where you have an accused, you have witnesses, you have a whole process where somebody is charged for an offense. The Criminal Procedure Act was drafted in 1977. And due to the fact that the AARTO legislation was going to be replacing some of the processes in there, they've never actually amended it. So the criminal procedure system has some very unfair processes in which AARTO actually tries to change. So if you just look quickly at what the screen there shows you, under the criminal procedure system, what they call a Section 341 notice, they can send that by ordinary mail. There's no actual proof that it gets sent. The legislation says it must be issued. That is it. There's no requirements for anything else. On top of that, the National Prosecuting Authority then came along and they created guidelines to make the process more fair, to say, if you were not stopped for and charged, etc., there must be a 30-day period within which you have to be served so that you don't get surprised 10 years later with a traffic fine. However, the Criminal Procedure Act doesn't cater for that. When you look at AARTO, especially the existing AARTO legislation, in the new legislation, they've actually taken those time periods out because they find it difficult to meet some of them. The AARTO legislation actually has certain specific time periods within which things need to happen so that you are not surprised with traffic fines years later when you do not even know you were charged. Furthermore, your representations process in the criminal system is a very informal business. One prosecutor sits there and doesn't even listen to you and scratches all the cases. The next one refuses just because he has a bad day. There's no specific system. If there's 800 magistrates courts out there and they deal with these things in different manners. If you look at the AARTO system, there's a structured system. It says a representation must work like this, and you have to do it in a specific manner. A Section 56 notice that you get next to the road has the end result of you actually being capable of being arrested on a warrant if you do not comply with it. It is a notice to appear in court, and it carries a criminal charge with it. So if you pay that, you're admitting guilt and you actually have a previous conviction. Many countries in the world have moved away from that for your lesser traffic fines, and instead of being labeled a criminal, it's more of an administrative offender. It makes a big difference when you need a police clearance or something like that. Then, as far as your summonses are concerned, they will remain in the system. That is currently used for if you were charged for reckless driving or something like that, or if you had a 341 notice which you continue to ignore, then they will serve you with the Section 54, which also carries a criminal previous conviction. Under the AARTO system, certain offences will remain offences, and those will not be moved into the AARTO system. Things like drunken driving, reckless driving, excessive speeding, etc., those will remain there. If you look at challenging a case in the existing criminal system, you have to appeal it to the High Court. That is a very expensive process. The AARTO system has created an appeals tribunal, as well as a cheaper alternative if you want to appeal something in that system. So that you do not need to go to the High Court for doing that. If we look at just who's where, if there are some of the guys here that's from authorities, your current personnel that, for example, deal with the clerk of the court and those so forth, they will be reallocated to do certain other things in terms of the AARTO system, because you will have a much shorter court role. You will not be looking at the same kind of cases going to court. One of the main aims of AARTO was to move cases out of the criminal court system and deal with them administratively. Furthermore, the system have not got arrest warrants for cases where you can get a traffic penalty. So in the criminal system, they refer to it as a fine. AARTO refers to it as a penalty. Even with a basic ticket like a speeding fine for 10 k's over the speed limit or something, or alternatively parking where you're not supposed to, could end up in a warrant in the criminal system, which is not the case in the administrative system. Then, if you look at the admission of guilt, currently magistrates are allowed to determine the admission of guilt in their districts. So you'll see there's a huge range of admission of guilt within the various authorities. They don't look the same. AARTO has a schedule, and anyone who wants to know what the fines are can actually see it there. I've already addressed the representations. Prosecutors will only be involved in offences. They will not be dealing with any AARTO cases. This is something that many people who are not managing fines in the Joburg and Tshwane area do not understand. They still think they can go to a prosecutor with an AARTO case. They have no authority to deal with it. Then if we look at who's entitled to do the enforcement, this is also something that's a bit of a bone of contention. In the criminal procedure system, anyone who's appointed as a peace officer may actually enforce that legislation. The AARTO legislation has a definition of an authorized officer, and only the guys from the RTMC, provincial traffic officers, local traffic officers, and traffic wardens have the right to issue AARTO notices. There are quite a number of additional forces that have popped up over the last few years. Law enforcement guys from local authorities, they're in the news quite often, and they currently are not covered under that legislation when it comes to issuing AARTO notices. In the criminal procedure system, there's no specific cutoff date for these traffic fines, but there is a national instruction from the NPA to say if the cases are older than 18 months, they are not allowed to be put on court rolls anymore. Obviously, when AARTO starts, only cases from that day onwards will be under the AARTO system. All the old stuff that is out there will still have to be finalized under the criminal system. So you're going to have at least an 18-month overlap between the two systems, where you will still be dealing with traffic fines under the criminal system as well as under the AARTO system. If you look at the maximum fines, under the criminal procedure system since 2013, the maximum fine has been 5,000 Rand. Only a few authorities like Cape Town and eThekwini and places like that actually have AOGs of 5,000 Rand. Most of them cut at about 2,500, somewhere there. There's no discount in that system. If the prosecutor wants to give you a discount, that is totally within their discretion. If a prosecutor wants to give you a fine on something for which you cannot get one next to the road, they have the right to go up to 10,000 Rand. Under the AARTO system, there's been no increases in the AARTO fines since 2008. The maximum fine is currently in Tshwane and Joburg is 1,500 Rand, and the discounted amount is 750. That is being raised now up to 3,500 Rand under the new draft regulations with the 50% discount. That puts you at 1,750. So if you pay fines within the new AARTO system and where you had the same fines for, well, we're going on 18 years about where they had the same fines in place where they never raised anything. Then as far as the financial arrangements are concerned, the legislation actually under the criminal procedure system is very vague as to who gets the money. In most areas, if a provincial or a RTMC official enforces the law there under the road traffic legislation, the local authority takes the money. Under the AARTO system, it says whoever is responsible for doing the work is getting the money. Quite a number of the questions we got in advance was about that. Where does the money go? Now, the interesting thing is Deloitte did a study for the RTIA some years ago to say that if they actually do a good job, they will work themselves out of money within a few years. Remember, if everybody starts complying with the law, nobody is charged and there's no fines. The Road Traffic Infringement Agency gets no money if a person pays the discounted amount. So let's say you receive a traffic fine for 1,000 Rand and there's a 500 Rand discount. That 500 Rand goes back to the traffic department that issued the fine. And under those circumstances, there's no money going to the Road Traffic Infringement Agency. The only time they will receive money is if you fail to pay that and they send a courtesy letter, which is the second step. Under those circumstances, they will get the other 50%. The first 50% always goes back to the traffic department. The criminal procedure system only allows for notice blocks for warrants against the owner, whereas under the AARTO system, if there's an enforcement order out for that specific vehicle or driver, then they can block them on the system. So it is much more effective in getting people to actually come and pay their fines. So the criminal procedure system also, especially once there's a warrant out or something, you have very limited places to pay. You literally have to go to the town and the magistrate's court where the fine was, where under the AARTO system, you can literally pay anywhere. You can go online. There's lots of places where you can pay traffic fines. It makes it much easier. This is just a quick reminder because I hear many people do not know about this. If you want to renew your vehicle licenses, and if you want to make appointments in Gauteng and the Eastern Cape for your driving license, please note you can actually get your vehicle renewals here. We've had lots of inquiries from people over the last few months where they actually use runners or someone to go and relicense their vehicles, and afterwards the notice system puts a block on them because those guys did not give the money to the authorities. After the post offices closed, a lot of the equipment was stolen. And many people are printing out these license discs to people when they are not on the formal system. They pick it up afterwards and they block you. So be careful where you use. This system goes straight to the RTMC, so you know it is a valid license that you're getting. This is the AARTO website login. If you want to do anything on the AARTO system, you can use this website. You can register there. Your proxies can register there, and they can actually get information on AARTO. Remember, currently it's only Joburg and Tshwane fines that's on the system. We do not have a national system for any of the others. There are some private service providers who provide for that information. If we look at the general information, just who does what, because that seems to be quite a bit confusing as well. The Road Traffic Infringement Agency under the existing legislation, they changed to the authority. They've got a registrar, deputy registrars, and representations officers. They are responsible for managing the representations, payment arrangements if you want to pay your fine off. They issue courtesy letters, enforcement orders, and they will in future be responsible for rehabilitation programs. They do a lot of community awareness, and they've got kiosks all over the country, and they also manage the demerit points. They do not nominate drivers. So if you have a nomination They are not, it goes onto that system, but it is allocated to the specific authority who's responsible for the original ticket. They will also be assisting with the appeals tribunal in terms of the current structure of the Act. If you look at your issuing authorities, that is now your traffic departments out there, either national, provincial, or local. They are responsible for issuing the enforcement orders, arresting people for offences. They must capture it on the National Offences Register. And if they have their own system, for example, for traffic fines with cameras and so forth, that system must have an interface with the native system, because all the fines will then be issued through the AARTO system. So we will, for the first time, have one national system. And whether you are committing an infringement in Messina or in Cape Town, you will be on the same system. We currently do not have anything like that. They can accept payments there as well. And the nominations of drivers will be there. So currently, not that many drivers are getting nominated, because where the criminal procedure system is in place, you find many proxies just feel it's too much slip and they pay the fines as the proxy. So they actually admitting guilt to all of those offences. Whereas in the AARTO system, if you do that, you get punished. Paying fines on behalf of someone else becomes a very bad idea in the AARTO system. They must also respond to representations. What you find currently is very frustrating. An officer does something and you don't agree with it. You try and go and make a representation with the prosecutor and nothing happens. Under the AARTO system, there's a formal process. That traffic department must respond, and they must say what the situation is as far as the specific representation is concerned. If we look at service of documents, which is one of the main issues in this legislation, because unfortunately the Post Office over this time that this legislation was written did not perform, and many people received no fines. So you'll see this happening at this moment. I get many inquiries on it. If you do receive traffic fines at the moment, AARTO notices specifically that you have not received before, please don't just leave them. Make a representation so that they can take them off the system. You will see the AARTO system doesn't really move that thing off the system. It simply shows it's cancelled, but you can always see it there. So if you have not received your fine, currently there's a cutoff of 40 days for an infringement notice, within which time you have to receive it. So if, like what happened with us, your post office is closed or whatever, you will be able to make a representation. If it's already transgressed into an enforcement order and they do block you, you must then not make a representation. You must request a revocation of that enforcement order, which is an AARTO 14. Both those documents need to be signed by a commissioner. Under the new legislation, and which has now been ruled legal by Judge Zondo, they are allowed to send you stuff via email. Basically, they don't restrict the method of service, but email is generally the best. They must keep record. There's the Electronic Communications Act. There are two of them, and they have very strict rules on how they have to keep record that they actually served you. Personally, I believe that either email version is much better. Since I registered on the RTMC website, every time my license discs need to be renewed, they send me a mail. When you get to renewing your driving license, they let you know. It is very convenient, and it doesn't cost them anything either. They have a system that is doing it. One of the main reasons why people made representations under the existing system, where AARTO is involved, is I didn't get my fine. Now, the amendments to the AARTO Act allows the authorities under those circumstances to reissue the fine. So unless you missed out on being able to nominate a driver, or you missed out on your discount, and your fine comes in 5 days late or something, it's a lot of schlep for nothing. They're just going to send it to you again. If you miss the opportunity to pay a discount or something, obviously make a representation and say, I got my fine late. But they will not like what happens now. That fine dies now. In the new system, they can actually resend it up to 180 days afterwards. There's a presumption in the legislation, whether they send you something by registered mail or with electronic service, they believe you received it within 10 days. So the fact that you didn't pick it up or you didn't read it does not make a difference. You must then prove that you didn't get it. So it's quite easy where your post office is closed and so forth, or if you there was something wrong with your server for your email, etc. But otherwise, you will have difficulty in proving you didn't get it. If you see something from AARTO and you just don't open the mail, that serves no purpose. The representation process works as follows. The representations is done via AARTO Act. It goes as an affidavit to the RTIA. If it's successful, they withdraw it and they must send you a notification. Everything in AARTO happens with a form. So they have to send you a notice for everything. You can also perhaps make a representation on a main charge. Like if you have a driving license but you've left it at home, now they charged you for the main charge, you can ask to pay the alternative. Obviously, it will have less demerit points and it will have a lower fine. So that process is available. If your representation is not successful, the last stuff I saw still had a fee in for that if it's unsuccessful. So they try and discourage you from wasting their time, because many people do. You can then appeal it at the appeals tribunal. If you feel that the appeals tribunal still listen to you, you can then go to a magistrate's court. There's also a new, you can obviously also pay at that stage, because if you feel, okay, I've now tried my luck and I was not successful, you can go and pay. The new notification was added to the legislation. All of these fines where people send you something and there's a blue Mazda on the photograph and you have a white bakkie, our notice, and they were not supposed to send it to you in the first place. There's a whole guideline document that says they cannot do that, but sometimes you find the authorities still do. You can just send them a notice and say, you have no evidence against my vehicle. That AARTO 8A basically says, just take it off my name. It's a much quicker process than the formal representation process. Then the duty of the owner has also changed quite a bit. In the existing legislation, the AARTO Act that's now in Joburg and Tshwane, it says that if you do not know who's driving your vehicle and you don't collect the information, you commit an offence. The new legislation says you may remain liable for the original fine. There's a big difference between the two. In the one is, let's say this is a 3,000 Rand fine. This guy drove 155 on the freeway with your vehicle. You do not go and nominate the driver. The authorities would then have to see, okay, now the company paid this fine. We do not know who drove the vehicle. They must then withdraw the case against you, and they must charge you for not knowing who was driving the vehicle, which is currently a 750 Rand fine. If you, in the new system, do not tell them who's driving the vehicle, you just remain liable for the original offence that was committed with your vehicle. The legislation says your duty is to tell them who drove the vehicle. You do not have to control that driver to the extent that if he's doing something wrong, you remain liable for what he's doing. That only happens if you cannot tell them who's driving. Now, obviously, the authorities do not know who's driving your vehicles, so they give that duty to you. As the owner of a vehicle, you have a responsibility. That thing can kill people. You must know who's driving your vehicles. And as long as you collect that information and you provide that to them, you're off the hook. There was quite a bit of discussion in NEDLAC as far as this is concerned, because some of the authorities started saying, no, but if you nominate a foreigner, or if they provide details on a person and it turns out that this person lied to them, that information is not correct, that they would say, because we can't serve this document, we're coming back to you and you have to pay it. That is not what the Act says. The Act does not say you're going to have to go and look after that guy for the next 6 months to see that he still lives there. Your duty as the owner is to say, at the time this specific offence or infringement was committed, this was the person driving, and this is the last information I have on where you can find him. And as long as you've done that, you are off the hook. There are two ways in which to nominate. AARTO 7 is the one that everybody is aware of. It is a process where you fill out the form and you say, this is the guy who's driving. However, with your bigger companies, like Savrala and those companies, they have a fleet interface user process where you register with the RTMC and the RTIA, and they provide you then, instead of issuing the infringement notice first to you, if they will send you a list of all the traffic fines that happened with your vehicles, you will populate the list and tell them this is the driver and here is his driving license information, and they will right from the start send the ticket to that guy. So they circumvent a second process. It saves them time and money, and it saves you time and schlep. So that is the process. It's already in place. If you feel that you have enough traffic fines that this will work for you, because you need an interface to be able to do that, you can contact the guys at the RTIA and the RTMC, and you can deal with that during that process. If we just very quickly look at what the process looks like, your new legislation, and the reason why I've got this information is simply straightforward. It was published for comment in October 2020. After that, there was a lot of input from Savrala and NEDLAC. There was an entire process that they went through. I assisted the RTIA with that process, and there are copies of the draft legislation that is out there that was distributed to NEDLAC and many people who are on that committee. I'm just not at liberty to go and provide that draft legislation to any of you, as I was just the one that drafted it. But there is copies of that legislation available, and I believe the moment that the minister signs it into law, they will publish it in the Gazette. We'll let you know as soon as that happens, those of you who are on our mailing list. If you look at what is in here, the infringement notice has got one less step than what you are used to. You can still pay and you get your discount. You can pay it off if you want to. You can nominate on an R23. You can make a representation, and obviously you can do nothing. What was also there was an opportunity to elect to go to court. Unfortunately, this was misused by many companies, and it was moved to a later stage in the process. So you can't elect to go to court now. If you want to challenge something, you must make a representation. Well, if you've done nothing, it will roll over to the RTIA. It turns into a courtesy letter. Now you must pay the full amount plus a service fee. I think the new service fee is 100 Rand. You can still pay it off. You can still make a representation, but you cannot nominate anymore, because now it's no longer under the control of the issuing authority. The RTIA has taken over. If you fail to respond to that, it will turn into an enforcement order. Please don't look at these things that says 32 days, 46 days, 92 days, something like that. All of these documents have to be served. There's a 10-day service period. They have a few days to deal with the admin. So technically, from the date you commit an infringement to the date that you actually have an enforcement order could be 5 months. And there's nothing wrong with that process. Somebody just misinterpreted this 32-day validity. The actual document is valid for 32 days. The process that is followed has got lots of little bits of steps in between. And you do not have a legal enforcement order if you haven't received it in like 90 days or something like that. When you have an enforcement order, you can only do one of two things. You can request it to be revoked if you have a reason for it. You paid, you nominated, they didn't record it, etc. These things happen. Or otherwise, you will have a block. It is prescribed on the system that it never goes away. It sits there until you sort it out. That is basically how the notice block works. Then if we look at the demerit points, the people who can get demerit points are only natural persons. So a natural person with your own vehicle. So if you are a proxy and you are working for a company and your name sits there against a company vehicle, you do not get demerit points for that. There are still people that is saying that out there, which is not correct. A natural person will not get demerit points against the vehicle. They will get it against the driving license. And a company who does not nominate the drivers for the speeding fines and the stuff, they will get the points against the vehicles. So a natural person, all of them, there's a maximum of 15 points. The operators, which is your double disc vehicles, they have certain duties in terms of the legislation on not to overload, complying with dangerous goods legislation, roadworthy requirements, seeing that their drivers are legally licensed. Those things are all offences under Section 49. And then juristic persons who are not operators, they were introduced in the legislation as part of the 2019 amendment. That is basically all your company cars which have that has a single disc. So there's an additional duty to ensure that your vehicles are roadworthy. And the legislation has an offence in to say that if you allow someone to drive those vehicles and they're not roadworthy, you can get fined for that as well. So your operator and your juristic person, for those things, they will get a separate fine than that of the driver. We've seen it over the last few months. Quite a few guys have been contacting me and saying, why am I getting 2 fines? The one was for the driver for a smooth tire, and then I got a second one. This is where it comes from. Only in Tshwane and Joburg at the moment. The only places where you can get demerit points for your vehicles as an operator or a juristic person is if you fail to nominate. The RTIA took that list that was published in 2020 with all the demerit points that were on there, and they cleaned it up completely. The decision was that only driving offences is going to be carrying demerit points. So that is your passing on a barrier line, skipping a stop sign, going over a red traffic signal, and then obviously speeding. So still 95% of the fines out there is for speeding, so those will carry demerit points. But things like a smooth tire, overloading, any of those offences or infringements will not carry demerit points. So the only time an operator or a juristic person who's not an operator, that is now your rental companies and so forth, they will only get demerit points if they fail to tell the authorities who is actually driving that vehicle. Because for no other kind of offence or infringement will you be getting demerit points initially. They can obviously change this later, but Schedule 3 as it stands at the moment only has demerit points in for those offences and infringements. This is just a few general things on the demerit points. It's recorded against the vehicle. So if you now have failed to nominate drivers and you do have demerit points against the vehicle, you cannot sell it and think the points will go away. The regulation actually says that specific points will just be saved on your business registration number, that BRN that you have for the proxy. And when you buy a new vehicle of the same type, that one will just have the points. You don't sell points. If you do nothing wrong for 3 months with that vehicle or for a person, you will lose a point. You don't go into a credit. They don't reward you for things that you are supposed to be doing, and that is complying with the law. They also have rehabilitation programs. There is currently a regulation, but it is still quite vague. They are still developing the rehabilitation programs. But once you've actually gone over the maximum of 15 3 times, you are labeled as an habitual offender, and you must then go for training before you are allowed to go and redo your learners and your driving license. In terms of the suspension and cancellation process, this was added in the 2019 legislation, where they made it more strict. They basically now said if they catch you driving with a suspended license or a suspended vehicle, that would result in a year further that you are going to be suspended. And furthermore, at this stage, the legislation also says you must go and hand those documents back to the authorities. And if you do not do that, that would also result in another year's suspension. They don't want people with suspended driving licenses to walk around and still show people they have them. People sometimes are concerned. They say, but what happens with my license? All your driving licenses are sent to a traffic department at the moment, and they have a process of securing it until you come and pick it up. That same process will be used to save them. This is what Schedule 3 would look like. It basically has 9 columns where you have a charge codes, descriptions of the road traffic legislation, land transport, cross-border, and then there's a classification, penalty units, and demerit points, together with the penalty value and the discount. I've just pulled out a few here just before the end of my presentation to show you what this deals with. For example, some of these now have demerit points and some of them do not. You'll see, for example, the axle unit mass load, there is no demerit points for that. There's a fine and there's a discount. If that last column has a charge coding, that means the operator of this vehicle will be charged for this as well. So there will be 2 fines. The charge code for the driver is that fine, the short charge code 1002, and the charge code for the operator will be 3512. There's a fine for speeding, and there you'll see there is demerit points there. There's a few more just as an example. 2299 is the charge where if you have a small vehicle that's in the company and it's not roadworthy and the traffic officer charges the driver, he will also charge the operator for this. 2299 is the operator charge for this. There are quite a few places in the legislation where in the last column there is a 2299, and that is the offence it relates to. Section 49D there at the bottom, that is fitness requirements for your vehicle. You'll also see the operator gets fined there, but there's no demerit points against that specific fine. Then something dangerous like passing on oncoming traffic, there's a 5 demerit point for that. Reckless driving is an offence. If it says NAP, it means no admission of guilt. It's not a NAP. It's not a good thing that happens to you. It says no admission of penalty in this case, sorry. And in this case, you will be going to court. There's no fine prescribed here because the magistrate can give you a fine of up to 240,000 Rand or 6 years imprisonment. So in conclusion, if you look at the process, the Constitutional Court ruled AARTO is allowed to roll out. The President needs to sign various proclamations to implement AARTO. in Tshwane and Joburg, the new Amendment Acts, as well as AARTO in the rest of the country. I think there will be about 6 proclamations that will be coming out in this regard. The 2024 regulations will repeal the entire set that's currently there with all its schedules and forms and everything. It will come out as a new set, and the new regulations will include the penalties, demerit points, forms, etc. And it will be, as far as I understand, a phased implementation that we will be communicating to you as it happens. So at this stage, speculating on when that could be, I would suggest perhaps the date for the elections might play a very big role in this whole process. It may be that they only decide to roll it out after the elections, but that's speculation. I have absolutely no idea whether that is the case. And also, nobody knows when the elections are going to be at this stage. So we do not know, but there's no specific date that was mentioned. However, most of the things AARTO asks of you is control your drivers, control your vehicles, don't overload, comply with the dangerous goods legislation, know who's driving your vehicles. None of those things should actually be dependent on this legislation being implemented. You should just be doing it in any case. So I think if one actually has that attitude, then AARTO's implementation will be a good thing. Remember, AARTO is designed to protect you against the people around you on the road. The National Road Traffic Act is designed to protect you against the people around you. That's why they force the people to have a driving license, not to behave like a hooligan on the road, have a vehicle that has a mark on that you can see who it is. And many people see the Road Traffic Act as this kind of a draconian legislation. It is quite the opposite. It is the thing that protects you against the people around you. And I think if one has a different attitude towards this legislation and you start driving the way in which you're supposed to, it just makes life easier. I started giving taxis a gap. You will not believe what a very comforting environment I'm operating in these days. If you just give the guy a gap, he's not annoying you that much anymore. And he's got 16 people in there that needs to go somewhere, and they're all sitting with very big eyes there because he's doing all kinds of shenanigans. If you just give him a gap, at least you are not giving them a heart attack for that moment of the day. So sometimes I think we sometimes take these things too seriously, in the sense that we see this legislation as being something that's bad, and I don't understand why. We all have children out there on the road. We all want people to around us not drive like hooligans. I don't know why people would think this is a bad thing. I just don't get it. For those of you who are interested, annually we have road traffic legislation workshops. Now this year, hopefully we will have something to actually present to you, because the National Road Traffic Amendment Bill and the National Land Transport Amendment Bill, as well as the Economic Regulation of Transport Bill, have all been approved by the National Council of Provinces. They're lying on the President's desk. They obviously are sitting in the same problem as anything else. We're wondering about the elections. However, that legislation has now finally been approved. There's been some changes to it. And in May every year, we have like a full day session where we explain all the ramifications of that to you. Because remember, AARTO is just the process on how the legislation is going to be prosecuted. Whereas the NRTA and the National Land Transport, etc., that is the act where the actual instructions are. The offences, the things you are supposed to be doing is in that legislation. So that is why they tie up 100%. AARTO is a process act to tell the authorities how to deal with people who do not comply with the other legislation. And as far as this process is concerned, there's a lot of new things that are introduced in that legislation. You may have seen in this week that the Premier of Gauteng is announcing new number plates with all kinds of new features and things as well. All of those things are actually offences. If one does not comply with them in future, that AARTO will be used to charge people for. We have a free mailing list. If you are interested, we do not bother you except to tell you once a year that we have this workshop. But apart from that, every time we have changes in the legislation, we send an update and we tell you that there's something out for comment if you are interested, or otherwise some legislation came into force. You are welcome to send an email to admin@AARTO and Lizette can put you on the mailing list. That's me. Hopefully I've managed to finish in time. Eugene, can I stop sharing my screen?
Yes, please do, AARTO. AARTO, thank you very much. To say I understood everything would be a gross overstatement, all right? And I think
Was I a bit fast?
elaboration of it is actually mind-numbing. Not that it's not valid and relevant, and thank you for that. I do think some of the participants will have gained some comfort from what was shared. It's not as bad as what it looks, and I think that most people who feel it's as bad as what they make it out to be is simple ignorance. And we trust that institutions or occasions such as this will help them to get a better understanding. I must just tell you, AARTO, that unfortunately Zoom created a problem for us. So we only worked with 100. We were going to close it down and open up, but we are running on YouTube. So anybody who wants to view this, there is a full recording of this. So they will be able to request it from us, and I hope that we can actually artificially slow your voice down a bit, so we can then help them get through it. But thank you, AARTO.
You said 45 minutes, Eugene. I did it in 45 minutes.
No. You did it in 43 minutes, so I'll give you that. All right. So congratulations. AARTO, would you mind, when you switch off your camera, stay with us, please? We will be fielding some questions at the end of our panel discussion, but thank you again. Folks, as indicated to AARTO, we apologize profusely. Zoom let us down, unfortunately, but the full recording will be available to any of those. We will let everybody who registered know, and of course, it's running on YouTube at the moment. With that, let's move to our second part of our webinar, and that is a panel discussion with the representatives from SAIA, RMI, as within NADA, and then, of course, Sabrala. Please, could we welcome Sandile, Brendan, and Pam to join me? And I would just like to give you an overview of the organizations that they represent. Hi, Pam. Hi, Brendan. We're just waiting for Sandile to join. If you can. Hi, Sandile. There we are. Let me just give the audience an overview of the organizations that you represent, please, because I do think the purpose of having you on board with us was so that our other viewers can actually understand the work that's gone into ensuring that there's a proper understanding of AARTO. If I start with Sabrala, the numbers that I have from you, Sandile, is that you represent 38 of South Africa's top rental, leasing, and financial institutions. You also have something like 600,000 vehicles as an association under your control. So clearly, if there's an issue, you would know about it. So if there's anything that I've missed, please fill me in. Then, of course, we have NADA. And Brendan, thank you for joining us. It's the National Automobile Dealers Association that represents something like 1,451 franchise dealers. And if I understand you correctly, Brendan, you've grown because pre-COVID you were 1,341. Is that correct? So there's greater need for who and what you do. And you represent all the new vehicle franchise dealers and the qualifying used dealer outlets. And that gives our audience some comfort, I think. Pam, and I'm going to quote your mission statement here, or part of your mission statement, because that impacts on all of us. In that you say, encouraging fair and ethical treatment of consumers of non-life insurance products. So our listeners out there, or our viewers, will take some comfort in the fact that you have our welfare at heart. But as I understand it, you represent something like 57 members who are non-life. So it's all the short term, and there's reinsurers included over there. So if there's anything that you'd like to add while we're discussing this, please throw it in. Sandile, if I can start with you. The obvious question is, and we assume you must have been involved in discussions, and the fact that AARTO made reference to this, at what point did you get involved with what AARTO was intended, and how has this had an impact on the industry?
Thank you very much, Eugene. I think perhaps at the outset, I just want to thank my colleague out at AARTO for basically laying the technical side of this act. We have, as she has mentioned, been working on AARTO for quite a number of years. But I think it would be really remiss of me not to also thank the other people that were involved in basically just looking at this AARTO through NEDLEC, the guys in business, a whole lot of people in business, the community, the labor, and government as well. Having said that, Eugene, perhaps before I attend to your question, I must say that it is very concerning, though, the whole absence of current and updated regulations. I think AARTO did refer to that. A whole lot of work has really gone into this, and I think it's important that those regulations are come out, because then they basically need to ensure that they fall in line with the Act. And, we're at this stage, that's what we're waiting for. I just thought I must highlight that fact. Savrala has been involved.
Carry on.
Yeah. No, I was just saying, Savrala has been involved with on AARTO for as long as I've basically been around, I think, in the early days. But our involvement took us to, presentations in Parliament in 2017, where we, commented, for instance, on the proposed amendments. Then, Savrala, I need to just tie back to what I think your introduction as well. Savrala supports any intervention which lead to a reduction in the unacceptable level of death and carnage on our roads. So it is for that reason that we are really involved. However, the reality is that the AARTO itself has had serious financial burden on the industry, which is why we've had these continuous bilaterals with the Department of Transport, the RTIA, both the RTIA and the RTMC, to ensure that at least those sticking issues that AARTO mentioned, were addressed before the final implementation. So, basically, Savrala has really been very much involved. And I recall that, where we have, as I indicated, for several years now participated in various meetings and workshops to try and ensure that AARTO is more focused, importantly, on changing driver behavior, which is what you mentioned earlier. But certainly that it is focused, on the administrative process, which takes advantage of the available technology. And AARTO has, beautifully referred to that, without compromising a road user's rights and access to, the justice system. That is very, very important. So
by the way,
just as a preamble, I thought I must just highlight that as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll get back to you now in a moment. Brendan and Pam, if you want to chip in at any time, please do so. This is a conversation. Savrala goes back to 1970. So clearly there's a wealth of knowledge about what happens on the road over there. And I think that what you've highlighted, and it's the good thing about this, and I think AARTO made reference to the point that if you're obeying the rules of the road, AARTO shouldn't be of concern to you, correct? Yeah. I think, though, that many people, and we know that it happens, you refer to people who are dependent on monies for their system to make the municipalities work, but that's a separate issue. So you've given us a nice introduction there. Brendan, maybe if I can direct it to you. You represent these people who sell vehicles. What has been the impact from your perspective? How is it going to work for you guys?
Yeah, Eugene, that's a great question. AARTO brought up what AARTO really is, and it's a process-driven, enabling piece of law. And Sandile also made note of the fact that we're waiting for these regulations, and for the non-legal people on board, an act is what you need to do, regulations are how you need to do it. And when we don't have the how, that leaves uncertainty, and uncertainty creates risk. But yeah, for us who sell these vehicles, who put the cars onto the road, there will be a range of procedural changes in our world. Demerits will be probably the top area. A lot of the other elements of AARTO actually help everybody in terms of moving from a criminal sanction to an administrative sanction is far superior for anyone, but it does create more administration and more process. So, you know, in the dealership world, it will change the buying model. It will make it a little bit more administrative, and we can talk to that a little bit later. But initially and upfront, we see, you know, a structural change, how to deal with the process of what demerits mean to the business of a dealer, our staff members, our drivers, our delivery people, and then, of course, our customers, what it means. A person with a suspended license can't test drive a car, can't buy a car. And, you know, there are a lot of little nuances that our industry is working with. For example, currently, if the person holds their driver's license and it's properly issued, we check it. If it's real, they can go test drive a car, they can buy a car. But now, if they haven't handed it back to one of the authorities, we have to find out a way to see if that license is suspended. Can that person be on the road? Same thing with staff members. If a sales executive doesn't have a valid driver's license, they can't do a test drive. Parts delivery guys can't deliver parts to the workshops, panel beaters. So yeah, so in our industry, there are a lot of error elements, very procedural, very background, but, you know, nothing that can't be overcome. It's just that while we wait for these regulations and we wait for a lot of the specification documents and the processes from the Road Traffic Infringement Authority and the RTMC, who are also waiting for the regs, we're just in a more hurry up and wait scenario right now. Thanks.
Brendan, thank you for that. And I think just given the fact that you represent such an enormous body, it is important that anybody who's joined us realizes that it hasn't just been something that's been put in place by government. There has been input from the business world. And I think that if they take some reassurance that you're an attorney, aren't you, or a lawyer by profession, Brendan? So you're quite analytical. Okay, so we trust that you represent AARTO very well. Sam, Pam, can we just talk to, now, people who rent cars, that's one issue because there is an insurance component, but the vehicles that Brendan's crew sell to individuals who have policies, how's it going to impact on those ones?
Well, one, it's when an insurance policy is issued, it has to be issued in abidance to a law. So, for instance, if a driver's license is suspended, then you're not able to get insurance because it's a condition that sits in your policy contract that says you must have a valid driver's license. You know, for instance, if you buy a car from a dealership, you need to produce, you know, evidence that you've got insurance. The bank wants it, the dealership wants it as part of the process. So if you don't have a license to showcase that you are, you know, are able to drive off with that car, then it becomes a problem for the consumer. So it's in everybody's interest to abide to the law. I mean, you can't drive on the road if you don't have a license, a valid license. So yeah. Logical.
One of the things I noticed, and whether it's changed or not, if you don't have a driver's license and you drive, you get 60 merit points immediately. All right, that carries over when you do get a license. You start off with 60 merit points. So indeed, what I'm interested, I was many years ago in the rental industry, and it was straightforward. In fact, today I go rent a vehicle, I got to produce my license. And please, if you don't have a definitive answer, it's not intended to put anyone on a spot. What is going to happen if I come along there and I now try to rent a car and the license I give you, let's not speak about those that they should be given in. Let's assume, and I've got demerit points. How is that going to impact on the rental industry?
Well, I think let me turn that around and just say that the AARTO system, you know, is definitely going to place a substantial responsibility on our members to ensure the details they obtain first are correct, you know, from their customers. That the license is valid and up to date, and that they have, you know, the correct details to basically nominate. Should they be required to do so. So that's just but one part. But also members will have to communicate systematically with RTIA, which is part of the reason why, I mean, I think we've spent quite a bit of time on ensuring those interfaces, but also and have the resources, the necessary resources to receive the various notifications. I think that was referred to in AARTO's presentation. So there's quite a few things that right now to ensure that at least we safeguard the industry, that the industry is going to have to really take cognizance of and make sure that they're strict in applying them. Having said that, there is obviously no assurance at this time that each municipality, for instance, will provide timeless infringements, so the members can redirect systematically within the fleet nomination stage. Due to the I think AARTO also referred to the staggering rollout to all the municipalities for digital infringement. And this does, or is certainly going to place the industry at risk. I hope I'm addressing your question.
Indirectly, yes, you are, but you are very politically correct, Sandile. You know that you're a man of smooth words. Can I just, Brendan, and I'm sure this interests you because you sell a lot of vehicles into the rental industry. So talking about long-term rentals now, Sandile, so it's not the short-term renter that uses it for a day or two. Let's assume that's on a full maintenance lease or even a year's long-term rental. How do you see your operators engaging with the leasing company on updating information that may transpire with regard to the driver who has some infringements on his licenses? How do you see that happening?
Well, pretty much the same applies, except in this case, obviously the driver would tend to receive those directly from whatever authorities, but pretty much the same, which is why in our technical work that we're doing with both RTMC and RTIA, it does involve the likes of our leasing members, the likes of Standard Bank, West Bank, etc. So yes, the same applies. They are not different. The only thing is that yes, is the long-term sort of rental, as it were.
Thanks. Pam, if I can go back to you, not from your point of view, but now organizations who carry insurance policies. I take cognizance of what you said, the driver must obey the law, etc. What are some of the things that organizations are going to have to introduce or take cognizance of in order to ensure that the vehicle that they're insured and the person who's driving it will benefit from the insurance cover?
I hope I answer this correctly in terms of your question, Eugene. So effectively, when AARTO is in full effect, meaning that the merit system is in play, the most important part for the insurance industry is to have accurate data that is timelessly available. You can depend on it, you can take surety from it. Because if we are going to say, okay, let's look at the license, status of the license, the demerit points is a depiction of the driver behavior. And as you know, every insurance policy is assessed according to the risk profile of whoever is being insured, whether it's a company or whether it's the driver himself or herself. So risk profiling, it will be a risk-adjusted premium based on the risk that's being insured. If there's no license, you cannot possibly drive a car, so you cannot take out motor insurance. The operator, the driver, it's all their responsibility. It's the insured responsibility to make sure that their status is up to date. If there are any issues on their driver's licenses, they are responsible to contact their broker or the insurer to say, I've got a problem, this is my situation. And in that discussion, it will be, arranged with the insurer through the broker or the insurer direct. But what we're doing as an industry, we're preparing to be able to consume this data. We are in discussion with RTIA to see how we can consume the data. We are hoping to pilot something that will showcase when it's already in full-fledged, what are the kinks? What can we do before it's fully implemented? So that's what we're planning. That's what we're discussing with RTIA, and that's what we're discussing with RTMC. We have been informed that it will go through eNatus. So eNatus is already a mechanism we are utilizing as the insurance industry. RTMC has made that available to us, and we're told that it will go through Natus. So through Natus, we'll see how we'll be able to consume that data. Can we depend on the data, et cetera, et cetera. We are obviously cognizant of Section 33, which talks to the information of the driver status is available only to the driver or the employer. But as you know, with any policy that we're underwriting, there's always consent. Can we check your ITC? Can we do this? Can we do that? In fully fledged compliance of BIA. So we will follow the same process. When we're accepting a policy, we'll ask, can we check your driver's license status? And therefore, through that, we're able to do what we need to do as an industry to continue doing what we're doing, which is to check, your status before we, incept policy, if we incept the policy.
Thanks. I'll get back to you in a moment, but I have a figure of only 35% of vehicles on the road are insured at the moment. And I'd like to get your view, and it wasn't part of the questions that I asked. How will AARTO, in your opinion, impact on those drivers who don't have insurance policies? Is there anything we can do? But Brendan, if I can talk to you, you represent, and everybody here represents the good, the well-behaved, and the organizations that want to abide by the law. How do you foresee this impacting on people who buy second-hand vehicles, where the organizations selling them will have certainly less ethics than the groups that you represent?
Yeah, let us talk to the unregistered second-hand vehicle dealers, not part of any association. I mean, the current processes in place still stand, and there's a lot of negative activities which already occur, which needs to be complied with and enforced better, such as people who park their vehicles at a Wendy house and try and sell them instead of going through the proper process where the dealer buys the vehicle in, stocks that vehicle properly. In that process, goes through the Natus system, makes sure that car is clean, make sure that car is all of that, going through roadworthy. So I think those things are still vital. And when AARTO comes in full, nothing there will change. Those who follow the rules will follow the rules. Those who don't will not. And that comes down to enforcement from the authorities' side. I think what this does for those who want to follow the rules, such as our members, is that with AARTO and a national system, once all of those links are built and approved through the RTIA, RTMC predominantly, we'll have better ability to check what we're buying in. And if we buy in better, then we sell better. It's as simple as that. So we'll be able to check these cars a lot better than we currently are. We'll be able to query the status on the vehicle, not just about infringements outstanding, but if anything's happened and a lot of the items to do with the vehicle, was it scrapped and things like that. And that allows us to offer better vehicles, safer vehicles to customers. And that's just good for everybody.
Yeah. I'm not sure that AARTO mentioned it, but as I understood it, that if you wanted to inquire on the status of demerit points on somebody's license, we're going to have to pay for it. Am I correct?
That's as far as we're aware, yeah.
Okay, so what do you foresee the financial implications are for companies or employees or employers who want to check on the status? In one of the things that abroad they recommend before you employ a driver, which is from our point of view where we want people to drive properly, is that you can check their status, and that should give an indication of their risk. So Pam, do you see if there's demerit points at X point? We know they're sitting at 15, after which they're suspended. Do you see that there's a premium going to be loaded if a person's in the higher category, or companies whose drivers in the higher category? And if Sandile, if I can ask you, do you think that if somebody's got renting a license legal, there may be any associated penalties if they've got a high number of demerit points? And please feel free to comment on your side as well, Brendan.
Well, Look, I mean, unfortunately, at this stage, Eugene, there is no way for members to check the validity of a license in terms of demerit points. I think this was one of the sticking points because what we are trying to achieve with the RTMC and RTIA through our, our technology guys is to get to that point, particularly when the demerit phase comes in, because right now it is in our interest to see, what your demerit point status is. So there is just no way at this stage to prepare for, that sort of, eventuality where a license is either suspended during the rental or leasing period, or the client themselves, have got only one demerit point before they lose their license. So these are the ongoing sort of bilaterals between us that were also referred to in our discussion at NEDLEC to say that, we will continue to iron out the technical bit. And, we're looking up to the RTIA working with our technical people to address that.
Sandile, would it be fair to say that because your organization represents the industry, any organization qualifies and that is not a member of the association should actually want to be part of it because of what you're doing for the industry? Is that a fair statement?
Certainly. Perhaps let me, utilize this opportunity to just correct your number. We don't have 38 members. We currently sitting at 52, which is just, it's a drop from before COVID. We're just about 49 members, and right now we're on 56 members. And thanks for giving me the opportunity to just talk about Savrala. But certainly, it's important for any, of currently, there's a whole lot of current companies that are out there, but we have a code of conduct, which is very, very strict, that our members have to comply with. And whilst we, are so involved in this sort of lobbying work, it does benefit those that are outside as well. But certainly it's a lot better to be inside Savrala than to be out there.
Okay. Brendan and Pam, seeing as Sandile's used this as an opportunity to plug his business, is there anything that you'd like to add over there before I move through to some of the final questions?
If I may, Eugene, sorry, Brendan. Can I go? Thank you, Brendan. So what is important, I think, to note, instead of people seeing AARTO as a stick, but rather as an opportunity. One implementation, it's working well, it's ticking all the boxes, is that it allows for our industry, the non-life insurance industry, to be innovative. You reward good behavior, and you obviously, I can't say punish, I don't want to say punish, but you risk adjust the premium according to the driver behavior. So I think, from a country goal perspective, to reduce our road crashes by 50% by 2030, it will go a long way in terms of accomplishing that. We do need to think about some of the basis risks that might be in play regarding, people evading going into the system by, elements of whatever in the, in the process of them getting a fine. We just need to think about that collectively to see how can we mitigate that kind of risk. But from an industry perspective, we're excited. Road safety is one of our strategic pillars, and we believe that AARTO has a huge potential of really, really shifting the needle in terms of impact to improve road safety in South Africa. Thanks, Eugene.
Brendan, just before I get to you for your plug, Pam, just thinking about, and this is, I don't know on what basis, and you mentioned data, what processes do we expect to see from the insurer that will help start analyzing that risk in order to apply a proper premiums to the company or the driver?
Data is important. The more data you have, the better. because you're able to risk adjust the premium correctly. The more granular the data is, the longer you have the data, all of that adds to profiling the risk. And with profiling the risk correctly, with the more data you have, you're able to be more precise in terms of reflecting what that risk profile is in the premium.
Okay.
That's
Thanks,
fairer.
Ben. Thanks, Ben. Brendan, here's your plug.
Excellent. No, I mean, you know, our umbrella body RMI has a logo which or a plug that goes, belonging is better business, and it is. Information is power, certainty certainly is power too. And like Sandile said, you know, you join an organization, you meet the terms and conditions, you meet the standards of that organization. It builds trust amongst consumers, but for the membership, it will obviously build knowledge and certainty. You get access to what we're doing now, you get access to new developing legislation. And I think that is just so important because so much is coming at us all the time in business, and you need to be able to cut through a lot of the kind of noise to get to what stuff really is. And that helps create confidence. It helps, you know, sell more vehicles. And that's really important. Obviously, we're in business to sell cars, and, you know, a safer road, easier enforcement in terms of an administrative system instead of a criminal system, is just better for everyone's businesses. We'll have more customers, we'll be able to sell better cars, and it just works very well. And not to be naive, this all comes down to how well the enforcement systems work, how well, you know, people comply with the rules that are there, and more than anything, how well the plugins work between business and RTMC, RTIA. Access to data runs this whole thing. But we truly, truly believe that if we can get this right, we must try for it. It's not utopian. It works in other countries, and it's been since 1998 we've been waiting for this. So we need it. And you know, the better guys will always follow it, and our members, you know, then will create trust amongst consumers. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for highlighting that, because, you know, many people are of the opinion that it's very recent. It's 20 years, over 20 years in the making. And I think that if we haven't had the opportunity to adjust our thoughts to its actual reality, and if I can just share before I ask two final questions, is there anything wrong in making sure that you're compliant? Isn't that in the best interest of any organization? And I think that sometimes people feel it's not worth it or whatever. So one of the questions, and anybody who'd like to comment on it, what do you think companies' biggest fears are that makes them resist AARTO? I think we put aside, AARTO's unpacked it, that it's not companies they're going after. What do you think companies' biggest fears could be?
I think, you know, if I just jump in just because I clicked that, the biggest fear is the unknown and the inability, I think, especially on company-owned assets, and this comes into any fleet owner and Sandile as well, the rental side, is that inability to effectively nominate, that it bounces back on the company-owned asset, and the company-owned asset is parked. That is hugely worrisome. In dealerships, it's the demonstrator vehicles, it's even used cars that have been test driven too much. If the car has to be parked, it's not able to earn an income for the operator. And I think that, to me, is the number one worry, more than everything else that there is.
Okay, thank you very much. So my final question, and I'd like all of you to feel a comment. What parting
I wanted
words
to
of
comment
advice?
on that one.
Okay, go for it, Sandile.
Yeah, I think, look, I mean, I did refer to the fact that certainly with Sobrala, we found that AARTO, you're talking 20 years ago, it seriously had, you know, administrative costs and significant business interruptions. It scaled down a lot, as highlighted by AARTO. You know, through those discussions and, you know, at NADLIC. But also, you know, the industry found itself, you know, getting blocked And then I think she also kind of referred to that. I just want to highlight an example here. You know, I was looking at our numbers. Just last year, you're talking just over 2 million transactions taking place. And we're talking the measured market. And, you know, these are rentals that are taking place, just over 2 million transactions. So those are the number of invoices. So if you think about nominations, you know, that take place per month, you know, it just tells you the scale. So if these are not done correctly, so you can imagine the sort of havoc it would literally bring our business to a standstill, which is why it is so important for us to make sure that there's, you know, interfaces that are working correctly, and those sticking points that could potentially see our businesses come to a standstill are avoided. So I just thought I must just throw that one in. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Okay, guys. Sorry, I've just had an update. Over 200 guests joined us on YouTube, so we thank those. Just the last question. If you had to give any advice to any person who asks you for your comment on AARTO, what advice would that be? And I'm talking corporate, all right? I'm not really focused on individual drivers. What advice would that be? Who would like to kick off?
If I may, Eugene, I think I would give advice to say, understand how it will work. Understand the ramifications of non-compliance. So you don't want unnecessary business interruption, or your business being interrupted, I should phrase it, because you did not investigate enough, you did not prepare enough for it, you did not put processes in place that would allow you for when the switch is switched on, you're able to plug in. Maybe there will be labor pains at the beginning, but I think the more prepared you are, the better positioned you'll be.
Yeah. Pam, if I can just add, it's not a matter of we think there will be labor pains. And I don't think it's going to be as seamless as some people think it should be. Sandile, I'm going to ask you now, because you can keep your comments to like 10 minutes and less, all right?
Oh, same question, I suppose.
Yeah, same question.
Yeah, you know, I just want to highlight what's very, very important for organizations making use of our industry, the car rental and leasing, really need to be aware of. One, I think it's important that they need to know that there are proxies, you know, the various proxies will attract demand points and various fines, and that this may impact their ability to do their work. So that's just number one. But the second one, which is very, very important as well, is they need to know who is driving the vehicle. I think AARTO almost emphasized that point. At any time, particularly at a time of transgression, and this will be an administrative burden on them, obviously. But these are the two aspects, you know, key items that I think organizations that are dealing with the rental companies need to really take cognizance of.
Okay, thank you for highlighting that, because you know what my sort of take-home point is this. We always see the negative, and virtually every conversation I've had out there with people, and I had one earlier with a friend of mine, he says he takes an opposite view to me on AARTO. By the way, have you guys heard of Regulation 200? And Sandile, listen, I need to share that off the record, all right? Brendan, I'll let you know what Regulation 200 is. Your parting words, please, Brendan.
Yeah, I think administrative processes are better than criminal processes. I've said it before, I'll keep saying that. It means a lot more upfront work. It means a lot more homework to do. And it means enhancing the current processes and controls that a business has. As AARTO said, as Sandile said, as everyone has said, you've got to know who drove that car. You've got to know when they drove that car. You have to have those documents. And I think if we prepare for it properly, and that's the real advice in closing shot, is, you know, you prepare your risk rate, you can deal with the teething pains, you can deal with the issues that come, but you're prepared. If you wait for day one, If you see this phase 2 delay that was announced last week as take the foot off the accelerator, wait for it, then when it does come, we're going to be into a little bit of a problem.
Yeah, thank you for that. I must just share our experience with organizations has actually shown an improvement, because we offer some guidance direction as part of our training regimen on AARTO, an educational process. When you take a driver through and you realize how easily they can incur those demerit points and what it means by way of their employment, and what it would mean to, and we know that there's extended persons that they're responsible for. And suddenly we've seen drivers say, hey, I better pay attention to this. I do think that there's a good groundswell with a view to changing attitudes. And my sincere request, and anybody who is listening to this and who views it, should take a step back and say, let's look at what we can use good out of this, instead of seeing demerit points as a punitive system. But let's face it, if you've been naughty, you deserve the consequences. So folks, thank you very much. Brendan from NADA, you represent the RMI, which in fact is way beyond what you've spoken about now. So I do trust that all of those will benefit from this. Sandili, into the financial houses, the people who finance our vehicles are going to be impacted. And then of course, our friendly insurers over there. Pamela, thank you for joining us. We appreciate your time. Just like to ask you to switch off your cameras. We're going to see if there's time to field some questions, and then we're going to give away some prizes. Nishani, do we have questions to field, or are we going to just respond to those?
Can you hear me?
Colin, yes, I can hear. Just direct it through the chat box there, Colin, so we can field it there, please.
Okay, it's more of a lengthy statement than I can type at the moment.
Okay, all right. Okay. Anybody else who would like to, we will ask you to do it through the chat box. Colin, do you want to make a comment? And we trust the rules that we've asked everybody to be engaged in is constructive. So over to you, Colin.
I hope so. I thank everyone for the insight so far. I still have, and I know a lot of people do have, and I'm talking more here on Joe average private car owners. One, AARTO changes the system and makes you guilty until you can prove yourself innocent, which goes against the rule of law that is part of our Constitution. The onerous process of actually going through the various steps to question a fine that was issued really makes it easy for unscrupulous, and we know we have plenty of them. A traffic cop can take his Kentucky Fried Chicken and go and park on the side of the road, write down registration plates, and issue fines willy-nilly, knowing full well that the chances of ever being questioned or called to book are very minimal, because most people will actually pay the fine rather than getting involved in the paperwork. And there's nothing in the current regulations that is going to actually protect people from the unscrupulous. Also, I think it's still only a nine-member committee that is going to be responsible for the millions of cars out on the road. And I must say,
condense it to rather shorter.
I am absolutely for road safety. I am absolutely against misuse of any form of authority, and I see so much possibility for it in the current regulations.
That's a very fair statement, Colin, and thank you for highlighting it. And I'm sure that there are many others that are concerned about it. And we have people over here, these panelists that are engaging, and I trust these concerns will also be taken back over there. Can I suggest, in the interest of time, any other questions that need to be shared or answered? We will field it. Nishani's provided the information. If I can conclude the session, as we are a little bit over time, firstly, we'd like to thank the panelists. And guess what? A company called Vision AI, they have provided gifts for our panelists. They think you're great guys. When you get them, I trust that you'll be surprised and pleasantly surprised. So those will be delivered to you. So again, Pamela, Sandili, and Brendan, thank you very much. We also have some lucky prize draws. So those who stayed on, we have 2 gift hampers from Equestra, Carol Bridges, and Ruan Kleinans. Please make contact with our office. There are 4 courses from MasterDrive. These go through to Nadine Swat, Maria Prinsloo, Letitia Potgieter, and Jeremy Davids. Again, please contact Nishani. And then our favorite bankers, First National, have given a gift bag. One goes to Marla Naidu and the other to Darren Henry. And on that note, we'd like to bring to conclusion this webinar. And to the extent that's possible, any other updates other than what AARTO is able to provide through her system, please free to call us for a free consultation and to see how we can help you in achieving some of the gains that we hope that would contribute to a reduction in the crashes and fatalities on our roads. So on that note, thank you again. Thank you, AARTO, Pam, Brendan, and Sandili. Till next time.
Thank you, Jane.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eugene. Thanks, Take care. Cheers.